This one's gonna be a hard one. No pun intended.
Down the catwalk every day, and maybe someday we'll go all the way. The Bikini Model Academy.
I'm really not kidding when I say that Bikini Model Academy, the 2015 all-filler, no-killer quasi-movie, is going to be one of the most difficult reviews I've had to write. In a series that's seen me talk about the nature of humanity with Gandahar, reality with Split, and love with Necromantic, you'd think that a film like this would be an easy review. Say it's crap, call it an American Pie meets Harold and Kumar knockoff, and retreat to the garden for a much-needed knees-up. But if I were to do that, I'd be doing a tremendous disservice to just how pointless, dull, and generic this film actually is. In fact, if I hadn't watched this movie for myself, I don't think I'd actually believe anyone, let alone a professional filmmaker with a long string of credits to his name, would think that this was a good idea. This film was written and directed by Straw Weissman, who you may remember from my Cyborg 3 review. It was while I was researching Cyborg 3 that I first came across this film, and I made a mental note to come back to it at some point because, based on the footage I could find for this film on YouTube, it looked absolutely insane, and not in a good way. Weissman has a very extensive, if not somewhat unmemorable, history as a producer. He's covered all genres in that capacity, and his production credits are backed up with a very robust production management history. His directing credits, however, well, they're somewhat shorter than his producing credits, and I would say that this was quite possibly his best-known film from a directing standpoint. Weissman also wrote this film, and I'm going to go right ahead and put wrote in quotes for reasons that I'll get to shortly. His writing credits are even shorter than his direction history, but it's at least a little bit juicier. In particular, he helped to write Red Scorpion 2 and Fight for Your Life, the latter of which was a proper Category 2 video nasty in the UK because of its use of racist language and violence. It's probably his best known writing credit. In the UK at least. So with Weissman manning both the direction and the writing, I was thinking that this would be a pretty much done deal and that very little could go wrong with the production. I mean, the guy helped make Cyborg 3. He's been making films since the 70s. So with nearly 40 years of production experience under his belt, I thought at worst it could have just been a cheesy bad movie. I didn't think for a moment that it could somehow be worse than that. These are professionals after all. You know, life has a funny habit of throwing you a curveball that's very unexpected every now and then. I went into this not expecting much, but at least a base level of competency. And yet after watching, going out of my way to make sure that I sat and paid full attention to this movie, and I use the term movie in the loosest possible terms here, it's somehow been able to redraw the guidelines for what I would consider bottom-of-the-barrel filmmaking. I'm going to explain to you now the plot of Bikini Model Academy. And I'm going to spoil the ending because, in all honesty, if you're watching this movie for the plot, I'm about to violently disappoint you. The film follows TJ and Benji, two guys in their early mid-20s who've somewhat stalled in their lives. They both have partners who are only with them because TJ and Benji operate a weed-growing business in their backyard. When one night they accidentally overwater their weed and kill it, their partners immediately leave them to go and find someone else to take care of their weed-smoking needs. Thoroughly deflated, the pair take some advice from their Uncle Seymour and smoke up a bowl and summon the great goddess of the Kush, the mythical Gangina. Gangina tells them to follow their hearts, and the pair think really hard and come to the conclusion that the best business they could open would be a bikini modelling academy. A place where women could learn to look good in a bikini. And nothing else. With an investment from their Uncle Seymour, the pair get to work recruiting and somehow manage to pull in a team of misfit girls, who aren't really all that misfit, to wear bikinis and do a lot of jumping about. It's at this point we're introduced to Grubsnout, TJ and Benji's oldest rivals from their school days. Grubsnout already has a bikini model academy and a paintball business, and he doesn't appreciate TJ and Benji cropping in on his turf. So he tries to get it shut down legally. It fails, and as a last resort, Grubsnout challenges TJ and Benji's bikini academy against his own. There's then a 20-minute or so montage of bikini-related competitions. TJ and Benji win, buy out Grubsnout's bikini academy and paintball business, and Benji's girlfriend comes back to him and TJ falls in love with one of the Bikini Academy girls. And that's the whole movie, more or less. And I begrudge calling this a film because it's a bit like calling raw mouldy chicken food. I mean, yes, it technically is, but I for one certainly wouldn't want to eat it. And I really can't stress just how strained I have to be to call this a film. There's an opening act, the guys are in trouble and need to come up with a way to dig themselves out of a hole, and a third act, the big bikini competition where the guys pull it off and save the day. But that second act is almost non-existent. And that's because the script, again in air quotes, never really existed. Or if it did, it was in a storyline-only capacity. Now, I can't confirm or deny that this is the case, but I am very heavily inclined to believe, in my own opinion, that this film was shot in the same way that Curb Your Enthusiasm is scripted and shot. As in, the cast are given vague scenarios with an intro and an outro to the scene. They know how it should open and how it should end, and then they're told to improvise the entire sequence so that they can reach that end point as coherently as possible. This is stupid Curb Your Enthusiasm, if you will. Because every scene is just rambly, well past the point of being tolerable, and seemingly no one knows how or when to speak, what to say, or how it should be said. There are moments when actresses in this film will shout things out multiple times because either they don't feel that their lines have been picked up, or they want someone to respond to it, or they just feel like something needs to be said multiple times. The guys aren't much better, but they seem to have at least had a good chunk of their dialogue scripted to a point. They have the odd improvisey moment, but it feels at least like someone somewhere is telling them what to say or do to a degree. The girls? No chance. And only making matters worse in terms of performances, this entire film could best be described as softcore porn without the porn. That's both a comment on the plotline in and of itself, and of the performances. As an aside, my favourite line from this film is when TJ and Benji receive a letter from Grubsnout, and TJ immediately exclaims, "It's a letter from our enemy, Grubsnout." Classic writing there. What I'm trying to say is that this isn't a particularly deep or meaningful film. It's all very surface level, and it feels both very improvised and like sex is going to break out at any given moment, which ends up making this film deeply uncomfortable. If you're wondering about the sex and nudity in this film, there's little to nothing. There's 3 shots of boobs in this, one of which is a repeating shot of a previous boob shot, and 2 implied sex scenes where you see nothing. One of the most awkward and uncomfortable things about this movie is just how it treats its female cast. The women of Bikini Model Academy are effectively pets. They're in this movie to be cutesy and silly and wear tight little bikinis, giggle uncontrollably, and to be told by men what they can and can't do. They're used both literally and metaphysically as sex objects throughout. They're treated as bartering options at one point. And when they finally do try to stand up for themselves, our heroes for this picture actually rohypnol them. All of them. At which point they go straight back to being the submissive little bikini-clad hotties that this movie wants them to be. And this film wants you to know that's all they are. This movie felt like I was stepping back in time about 40 years in terms of female empowerment. The Bikini Model Academy universe is a universe in which if you aren't a smoking hottie, or if you value your intelligence, you're a nobody. I'm not joking, there's a bit near the end of the first act where TJ and Benji receive their first letter asking them to close down the Bikini Model Academy, and one of the bikini model girls steps forward and in the best dramatic softcore porn actress impression that can be mustered, says, "Some of us believed in this. Some of us thought this would make a big difference in our lives." To which I audibly shouted, "Fucking ludicrous!" Because it is. This entire film is totally ludicrous, and the way it treats women is appalling. Not helping matters, this entire film was shot for coverage. Meaning, talking about the cinematography and direction is pretty much out of the window. Basically, Weissman's instructed the camera operators to set up 4 or 5 shots ranging from roaming freehand cameras, which will cover close-ups and instant reactions, to mid-shot cameras that are locked into position, to wide shots that can be zoomed into in post. It's simultaneously the easiest and laziest way to make a movie. Because on the one hand it means you won't miss anything, but on the other it means there's little to no creative input and absolutely no room for stylization. Anyone can shoot for coverage, and that's the problem. It means Weissman effectively has had no input into how this film should look. By requesting that everything be shot for coverage, he's only gone on to emphasise that he's treating this film's audience with contempt, and that he didn't think it was worth his time or effort to make this film look or feel in any way good. I mean, realistically I don't blame him, but when you consider that he's the bloke who allegedly wrote this movie, you'd think that he'd have given a damn about how it looks to some degree. So basically, if you were looking for a tremendously in-depth exploration of the subtle shot setups in Bikini Model Academy, I'm sorry, but all I can do is stick a massive NA here because it might as well have been automated for all the effort that seemingly went into it. Continuing down the trail of despair, the location work and set design is ridiculously cheap. The entire film more or less takes place in 3 different locations, and that's it. A rented house with a pool, a street corner, and a driveway. There may have been 1 or 2 shots in a park, but I can't quite confirm that. And that's the entire film. There's some stock time-lapse shots to help with establishing, but they're really poor quality because it doesn't actually look like anything's happening. It might as well be a still image. Everything has that air of not quite being handled right. There are green screen segments that are poorly lit, the sets are minimally decorated, and most of the action takes place outdoors in open spaces where it's ridiculously cheap to shoot and they can have all the time they want. It just feels low rent. Only exacerbating issues even further, the soundtrack is nails on a chalkboard unbearable. It's all just stock music, and most of it is unpleasantly overbearing dubstep remixes of fairly standard tunes. Let me assure you, the dubstep version of Pomp and Circumstance will make you wish for death. And it's all very inappropriately timed. Some portions of this film, where music is desperately needed, are completely absent. And sometimes those music cues are met with absolutely the wrong music. For example, there's a sequence where our heroes are making space cakes, and the music used throughout is La Cucaracha, which is just pointless. There's no reason that song should be playing where it is. It's baffling. I really don't know what to say about it other than it's baffling. It's badly timed, badly edited, and gives off an ever so slightly aggressive vibe that left me just wanting it all to stop. And for the love of God, don't listen to this film's official theme tune. It will get stuck in your head and you will never be able to forget it. You have been warned. I feel at this point that I need to talk about the humour in this film, because this is a semi-comedy movie. Oh yeah, it's not just all about weed and scantily clad women. Humour is subjective, I understand and accept that. But equally, please take it from me when I tell you that this film isn't funny. Highlights of this movie include the initial interview section where the bikini girls say funny things that really aren't very funny, a nose-picking sequence, some fourth wall breaking in which TJ refers to Gary Busey's Uncle Seymour as a national treasure, people falling in the water by the pool, and fart jokes. Oh, and weed is funny. I don't know why weed is funny, but seemingly every time anything involving weed happens in this film, it's done with a nod and a wink to the camera. Like the bit where they make space cakes, or the bit where they then rehypnol all the girls of the BMA with those space cakes. I'm not kidding, if this film had slightly larger balls and it thought it could get away with it, I guarantee it would most likely have just done away with the plot contrivances and gone straight for bikini girls shouting, "Weed! Ah!" over and over again for 90 minutes. Bikini Model Academy was a direct-to-DVD Blu-ray movie that was also available on digital download, sort of, and as far as I can tell, it's never been released in the UK. My copy was from a German source that was distributed by Tiberius Films, a company I can find very little information on, sadly. I believe this one also saw a release in the US, but again, information is very vague about exactly how, when, and why. New Film Cinema was the film company behind this one, and they literally have no online presence that I could find. That being said, typing in New Film Cinema into Google is just asking for trouble in that regard. As it stands, I don't know if this was New Film's only release, or whether there are more of these absolute atrocities out there for me to work my way through at some point in the future. I honestly don't know who this film is for. At first I thought stoners, but then I realised that they have Cheech and Chong, Harold and Kumar, and most of Kevin Smith's films to fall back on. Even if they just wanted to see bikini girls, there's porn for that. Same applies for teenagers. They aren't going to find this funny, and if they want to see boobs and even more, it's only a click away. Same goes for perverts. In fact, I'd feel sorry for the pervert who bought this movie thinking they were getting something mucky and ended up with this. It's not an aspirational film for men or women, nor is it an instructional film. In fact, the only people I think would be interested in this production would be the cast, who now have something they can put on a show reel, and Gary Busey, who I imagine is just happy to see himself on a TV screen or highly reflective surface. It's an unsufferable affair of a movie, and I'm still stunned that it managed to fill out its 90-minute runtime. It's arguably one of the worst films I've ever seen. Though I can't say that it's the worst, because that to me would feel like I was giving it definitive movie status, when in reality I think it's honestly debatable. If they'd have dropped the pretense of there being a plot and just showed women in bikinis for an hour, I'd have probably still hated this, but I'd have at least accepted it as a slightly dirty compilation. I wouldn't have reviewed it, but I'd have accepted it. Hell, if they'd have even been a little bit harder on the sex scenes in this, I'd have probably been a bit more favourable with it, because in its current form it feels almost frustrated with its own impotence. It keeps desperately feeling like it wants to be porn without ever actually being porn. And I could accept this movie if it was just out and out softcore porn, because it would at least be true to what it wants to be. As it stands, it feels like a softcore feature with all the sex cut out, deeply struggling to come to terms with the fact that it can show boobs, but it can't do anything else. To put it simply and crudely, this film feels like it's trying to wank in oven gloves, and as a result it's having a hard time and the shepherd's pie is ruined. A horrifically shallow affair of a movie where stupid blokes take advantage of stupid women and all that matters is weed, money, sex and being pretty. It only has contempt for its audience and it's all lowest common denominator stuff. When your movie is aspiring to be porn, you know you've gone wrong somewhere. Only watch this if you're having a resurgence of faith in humanity and you want it correcting.